What is up, everybody? Welcome back to, of course, the lovely Adrenaline RC YouTube channel, where today we are going to be revisiting an older video that we have done before that I'm not super happy with, I guess you could say, and that is going to be building your differential, specifically a gear differential for your RC car. Now, like I said, I did this video that was one of my earliest ones. I guess it's probably close to like a year and a half ago now. And honestly, it was just kind of like the lazy way to do it. So today I'm going to show you the way that I now do it all of the time, fairly regularly. And then of course, this will also show you at the very least how to build your differential. So we're going to teach you how to build your diff like a pro. So I've got a differential right down here out of a Sparco vehicle. That is from my lovely friend. Let me fix my wire here. That's from my lovely friend, Mr. Anthony Donnelly. We have a truggy kit that we're getting built for him. So we're going to use his diff for today's video. So then, of course, like I said, you can learn exactly how to build your differential to have it just right and have the best results on track. Now, before we get super into that, I do just want to come over here to my personal truggy. Now, it's not done yet, but I just want to take a look at how pretty this thing is. I am waiting on some servos to come in, and very important news that'll be coming up about that very soon. But I don't have a servo in yet, which means I don't have my receiver mounted. But just take a look at that pretty speed control. And of course, we've got our Coyote 2200 motor in there. Now, I don't have this wired just yet, just because this is kind of like soft mounted at the moment. So this is going to move ever so slightly around. Then I will finalize that. And of course, we have some beautiful new 6800 packs. Let me flip us back around here. I'm struggling today, but that's okay. But yeah, so that is the current status of my truggy. I really, really like the color scheme of this Coyote stuff. Now, obviously, I haven't gotten to run it yet because, well, it's not finished. I've got to do some links. So I got to finish out like some steering stuff once that servo comes in, get the receiver and everything mounted. But it just looks so pretty. There's just something about a new truck with new electronics that just makes you feel good inside. But that is, of course, not our topic of the day. Our topic is going to be building the differential, but kind of ties that a little bit because we're building the differential for the equivalent of that truck there. So let me go ahead, get you guys set on the tripod, we'll get you guys up close, and we will detail everything about how to get the kind of process started, what I do during my build, and then of course doing the finalization of everything. So we'll get you in just a sec. All right, so here we are with everything out in front of us. Gonna go over a couple things that we're of course going to need. First and foremost, obviously you're gonna need some diff oil. In this case, we're gonna use some 20K for our center diff. Gonna need either your drill or hand driver with your 2.0. In this particular case, yours might be different. Got some O-ring grease, and then we've got just some general grease. In this case, it is green. This is what comes with the kit, and this is what we're gonna put on our out drives. Then we've got our center diff gear. Now, out in front of us here, this is the way that I would normally set it up when it comes out of the box. That way everything is organized and I know where it goes. Now, let's say that your diff is already built and you're just taking it apart and then throwing it back together for just doing a rebuild. For that, I do usually line everything up in order for how it goes back together. That way everything comes out and goes in at the exact same spot. So, like I said, this is how I would do it if I was building the kit. What I'll go ahead and do right now, just so we have a reference, is set it up as if I was just doing a rebuild. So like I said, I like to set everything up in order for exactly how it came out. In this case, because it is brand new, obviously I don't have an order for how everything came out because, well, it's already out. But I will show you exactly how I get it set up when the diff is already together. And all this is I mean, it's literally just putting it in a line for how it came out. That way you know exactly where everything goes, nothing gets mixed up, and then you can kind of keep an account for everything as well. So you can see we've got outdrive bearing, gear, go along with our gear and our outdrive. We do have some pins over here. Actually, I'm gonna move this pin over there. So spur gear, and then of course you've got your O-ring, your washer for your O-ring, and your pin. And then of course the sun gear is gonna sit on top of that pin. And then you've got your gasket, which is going to go into our spur gear. So that kind of takes care of this top half. The back half, or the bottom half, is going to be the exact same thing. Outdrive, sun gear, bearing, diff cup. Then you've got your pin that goes into your outdrive, and you got your shim and your O-ring that sits inside this diff cup. The center here is just, well, our spider gears. So we've got 2 cross pins, 4 spider gears, and the 4 washers that sit behind our spider gears. So from this point, we would be ready to start assembling. So the first thing I'm gonna do is we're gonna take our green goop. I'm gonna get a generous amount on my finger, and then we're just going to put a very nice, very generous amount onto this. I always like to put too much on there because, of course, you can always take it away. So because we have a lot and it's actually going past where it needs to, you can kind of just go back, take off your extra, and then wipe it onto a rag. Now, because I do have some extra on my fingers, I'm going to go ahead and we'll just grease our top one as well. That way we try not to waste if we can. And then any of the excess that does get too high up on here will go away once you start actually putting it inside the differential. But that pretty much takes care of everything that we're going to use the green slime for. So now I can wipe my fingers off and we can move to the next step, which we'll just go ahead and put our bearings on each side. And then we can take our outdrive and then slide it just into the base here. Like I said, anything that is too much on this outdrive will just kind of squeeze out onto the diff and the bearing. So then you can go ahead and just kind of take your rag, wipe off the excess. If there is still some on there, it's not going to hurt anything. It might attract a little bit of dirt, but nothing that is going to cause any major problems. Now we can go ahead, we're going to take our little orange O-ring there with our O-ring grease. And we're going to go ahead and load this guy up. Set our grease to the side. And then, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in there, but we just slide it onto that outdrive. And then in this case, we'll then take our first of our shims. And something I didn't say earlier, I do have a pair of pliers here. Those are very useful as well. And then we're just going to push this down into place. When I do the top side, you'll be able to see this a little bit easier. Then we'll take our pin, and your pin, you kind of just key in with one of the slots that's on the side. See all these little cutouts around the edge there? You'll key it into there, and then that gives it enough room to then be able to get it into the actual outdrive portion that sits inside the diff. Now from here, because this is brand new and totally dry, I do like to put a little bit of diff oil in it. If your cup has already been used, you probably don't need to do this because, of course, there's already going to be some sort of diff oil in there from being used. But I like to just put a little bit down in the bottom here, close that up, then we can take our sun gear and plop that down right on top. And there we go. Our bottom portion is getting closer to being finalized. From here, we can take our little shafts with our spider gears. And in this case, we're going to have washers that go behind each of these. Some diffs will have this, some diffs won't. In this case, it does. And then we can go ahead and key our first pin into the bottom here. And then I'll just put my finger on the actual pin itself, rotate a little bit just to get some movement of the oil on there. This is an opportunity also if you want to put a little bit in there before you put your second set of gears in it, you can, but I'm not going to worry about doing that. So we'll go ahead, throw our next 2 gears on, get our washers. And then in case you don't notice, on each of these pins, there's going to be a groove cut out. That groove is going to then key into the opposing groove on your first half shaft. So, I don't know why I call it half shaft, but your first pin shaft. So it's going to be important that when you put this in, that groove is facing towards the top. And then this groove will, of course, be facing towards the bottom because they're going to key into one another. And now we have the bottom portion of our diff. Now from here, we can take our fluid, whatever weight that you're choosing. Like I said, in this case, I'm using 20K. And we can go ahead and start squirting it in here. And of course, there is lots of air coming out with this, but that is not a problem at all. because what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for a minute before we actually go ahead and close it up. Always make sure you get all of these grooves around the outside filled with oil as well. If you overfill the diff, we're going to take care of that later on, so you don't need to worry about that being a problem. But it's always better to have too much than not enough, I think, because like I said, we can always remove it, but once it's closed, you can't add more. Then I'm going to take my 2.0, and we're just going to kind of move this oil around to fill all those grooves. If you're using a really light fluid, sometimes you can just tilt the diff and move the oil around that way. But in this case, 20K, it's a little bit thicker. Obviously, there's still plenty of thicker fluids out there, but just a little bit quicker to move it around with the driver. Once you move it around, then you can kind of get a better idea of if you need to put more oil in it, of which in this case, I do need to put more oil in it. Came out very interestingly there. And then we can go ahead, and again, because it's brand new, you probably should still do this anyway, even if it's not a new diff. We're just going to rotate around a little bit, very slowly. If you go too fast, I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the video, but my gears already started to lift up and I was going pretty slow. But you want to do it slowly just to get oil moved everywhere. And then you can take that driver again and just make sure it's pushed all the way down. From here, you can go and just double check, make sure all of your grooves are properly filled. Sometimes as the diff sits and the oil kind of levels itself out, they will remove the oil from themselves. But in this case now, I do have all my grooves nice and filled. So now I can set that off to the side. And the reason why I do this half first is just because, well, now while that's bleeding, we still have work to do. So we're not going to be just like sitting here doing nothing basically. So we already put our green slimy gooey onto our outdrive. We already put our bearing on the top of our spur gear. So we can go ahead, push these two together. Grab our O-ring grease once again. Try and pick up this O-ring. I don't have any fingernails right now, so it's a little more difficult, but we got it. And we can take our O-ring, push it down on top of the inner portion of that outdrive that's sitting inside the spur gear. Take our washer. Not every diff will have that washer, but if yours does, you'd put that on next. And then we can slide our pin in. Now I'm not going to put our top sun gear on just yet. Once this finishes bleeding, we're actually going to put this on top of the diff itself, and that's what's going to push out any of the extra oil. While we're waiting on that, I will go ahead and take just a little bit of diff oil on my finger, and I'll just kind of rub it around the inside. And this will go for all three diffs, whether it's a spur gear, ring gear, whatever. And basically what that does is it just gives a little bit better of a mating surface for our gasket. That way, when you tip this upside down to actually close the diff, you're not just gonna throw the gasket somewhere around. They can be real pains in the butt. So push that in, and then we are all set to go. So from this point, now it's just a waiting game of waiting for this to bleed. Thinner oils will bleed air quicker than thicker oils. And then as this is bleeding, like I was saying earlier, keep your oil on standby. That way, if you need to add oil somewhere, you can do it very quickly and be as efficient as possible. Now, if you are going to be doing a rebuild on your diff, obviously in this case, these gears are perfectly clean. There's no issues at all. When you do take your diff apart and get everything laid out, that's when you would go ahead, take your rag, clean out your different pins, clean out all the teeth on each of the gears. You can take either a pick, or a lot of times I'll use my thumbnail and then just kind of go through with my microfiber and then clean each of the teeth out individually. But I will go through, I'll clean each of the outdrive shafts that go inside the diff. I'll re-grease those. I will clean off the pins. I'll clean off all of the shims. I'll clean each of the teeth on all 6 of the gears. Of course, you have 2 sun gears and the 4 spider gears. And then I'll do my best with a rag to actually clean out all of the old gunk from the diff cup. Now, you're never going to get it all the way out. You can do your best, but a lot of times there's always going to be some sort of remnants, but you just want to get as much out as possible. And then also, while everything's apart, take your rag, clean off your O-rings, and then O-ring grease your O-rings. That way everything stays in good shape and doesn't deteriorate quicker than what it needs to. The reason why you put greases and stuff on all of your out drives and your O-rings is because if they're just dry on dry, then you're going to wear them out quicker, and then you can potentially develop a bit of a wobble in your out drive on the cup side or the spur gear side. A little bit of play is natural over time. Obviously, no matter what, there's going to be some sort of friction at some point. You know, this stuff does get really hot, and even with fresh grease, you know, if you run a lot of laps, then of course, you know, you can still run into, you know, getting some extra friction in there. The big thing is that anytime you take it apart, especially if it is, you know, a long time in between, you want to make sure you go re-grease everything and get it all in good shape. The only time that you probably don't have to worry about doing a full teardown of everything inside the diff is if like you do one run and you're like, holy cow, this is just way too light. If it's got 1 or 2 runs on it, you don't have to go so crazy. Then you can do what I did in my original video, which is just take a rag, shove it in there with the gears and everything in it, and then clean it out as best as possible. But of course, that is only if there's only like 1 or 2 runs on it. If I've got a race day or a good handful of practice laps on it, then I will go ahead, do the full disassembly, get everything re-greased and ready to go. That way everything stays in great shape. Now, there are still plenties of bubbles inside this diff. I was hoping through all of my talking spiel there that those would kind of eliminate themselves, but it is a thicker fluid. So what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and cut the footage here. We'll let this bleed. That way you're not just watching it bleed. You know, it's the effect. It's basically the equivalent of waiting for water to boil or watching paint dry. So we'll cut this, and then I will be right back as soon as this is ready to get closed up. And we are back and ready to close up our diff. So, got our diff nice and bled. We've got our sun gear that's gonna go on top. We're gonna take this, and of course you're gonna wanna key it into the gears. You're gonna push it down, and you're gonna notice that there's gonna be some oil that splooges up. Again, I'm not sure if you can see it in the video super well, but there is extra oil in there. We're gonna just take our finger, and you can kind of see it on my finger there. And then you just wipe it off on a rag, get any extra. Now from this point, you're gonna take either your 2.0 driver, a 1.5 driver, something small, a pick of some sort, and you're gonna go ahead and pull out the extra oil that is sitting in this pin slot. Now the reason why I do it in this fashion is because, well, A, I was told to do it this way, and B, this is going to make it to where every time you fill the diff, it is always going to be the exact same level every single time. It's going to have the perfect amount, and hopefully you won't have any issues with, you know, like hydro locking or anything. So now that we've got the extra oil taken out, we're just going to take our spur gear, and we're going to do our best to line up the pin in the spur gear with the little slot in the sun gear. Sometimes you get a first try, sometimes you got to mess a little bit, but we're just going to take it, put it into one another very quickly. Then I'll take my 1.5 again if needed. In this case, I didn't need it. We rotated it. That way all the screw holes line up. I'll double check that here just to make sure that that is in fact the case. Yep. So now we've got our screw holes lined up. Sometimes when you do move the spur gear around, the gasket will move around with it. So sometimes I'll just put the driver in each of the holes and then just kind of like shimmy the gear back and forth. That way the gasket sits nice and level. You don't want it to be, you know, halfway into the screw hole because you don't want to screw through the gasket. You want it to be directly on top of the hole. Now from here, you can take a drill. You can do it by hand if you want, but I'll set the drill at a very, very low torque rating. So in this case, on my Metabo, I've just got it set to 5. Actually, no, sorry, set to 4. And I'm not going to tighten this all the way with the screw gun. I'm just going to get it as close as I can. So you can hear the clutch gave out there. So that's as tight as we're going to go there. And I'm going to do this in a cross pattern. Now we're not tightening it all the way down just yet, but I do still like to do it in a cross pattern. That way everything is nice and even. That one stopped a little early, so I'm actually going to tighten that a little bit by hand. And we'll get our last one. Now, before I tighten it, just to make sure that we are definitely good to go, I'll feel the diff, make sure everything feels nice and smooth. Because of course, if one of the screws went in wrong or one of the gears got sat down wrong, you want to know that before you do your final tightening. So just like we did with that drill, I'm going to do a cross pattern here. So we'll go ahead, we'll tighten this down. Now, if you're super strong, I mean, don't get too crazy here, because depending on what you're working with, sometimes these plastics can be a little bit on the soft side. You don't want to strip out the plastic, because then if your screw is just spinning, more than likely it's going to start spitting diff oil out in that spot. Sometimes you can alleviate that some by putting a longer screw in it, but obviously the easiest thing to do is to just not have that happen at all. Now, you do still want it to be tight, because, well, you don't want it to leak, but you don't want to go like super like gorilla on it, I guess you could say. From here, now that we're all sealed up and we don't have to worry about oil running everywhere, I'll take my rag again and just try to clean up some of this grease that we've got on our out drives. Something I didn't mention earlier, if you don't have this green grease, you can use just like regular black grease. It's the exact same process. You just want to get a nice coating on there. So a little late in the video, because obviously now we're at the very end, but that's it. We are now fully built and ready to get this thrown in the car. The last thing you can do also, especially if you're not using just kit diff setup, or if you don't have it written down somewhere, take a silver Sharpie and just on the side here, it's a little difficult. It's not the easiest writing environment, but we got 20K in here, so we're gonna write 20 on the side. That way we know when we go to rebuild it, what we're pulling out of it. This won't stay forever. You can definitely take cleaning products and wipe it off. So like, it's not like if you change oils, this is gonna be there forever and you're gonna have to like mark it out. This does clean off, but at the very least, next time you go to rebuild it, you wanna know what's in it. So that way, if you want to put the same oil in it, you can, or if you decided it's too light or too heavy, you know where you're at and you can go, all right, well, I wanna go 2 or 3K up or down from this here. And you'll do that on all 3 diffs. The other thing also, in this case, because we have a spur gear, this is very obvious to be the center diff. If you're doing a front and rear diff, especially on a kit build, because generally you build all 3 diffs at the start, not only will I mark it with the weight that is inside the diff, but I'll also mark it with either an R or an F. Now in this case, like I said, it doesn't really matter, but all you do is just on the side, you know, mark this with a C to indicate it's the center. Mark the front with an F, the rear with an R, or if you have some other way of identifying it, you can do that. But as long as you know the oil in it and where it came from or where it's supposed to go, then you're all set to go. So that's it. That is how you build your RC differential like a pro to have the most success at the track, keep things consistent, and keep track of everything going on with your vehicle, and to get the most life out of it, because we hate spending too much money. If we could save money, that is always a great thing. So proper maintenance is super duper key. Thank you guys for joining me today, and we will see you next week for an all new video.